Hey everybody, welcome to today's live stream for effective remote work. If you don't know me, my name is Justin. Today what we're going to be taking a look at is Craft. As you know, I'm a large fan of Obsidian. I think it's an excellent piece of software, but as a Mac user, I have been getting and seeing lots of feedback on Craft. Craft, if you're not familiar with it, is a note-taking tool that's Mac and iOS only. But it has some flair like Obsidian and Rome and Notion kind of all mushed together as one. And I figured, why not take a look at it and see what all the fuss is about? So that's what I'm planning to do in today's video, is just kind of do some digging around inside of Craft, and we'll just dig in and try to figure out what the heck is going on. Buddha Dude, welcome. Thanks for joining the stream. Glad to have you here. If anybody else is watching and has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll be paying attention to that throughout the course of the live stream today. And two, if you have any questions about my Obsidian workflows or productivity in general, I'm also an OmniFocus user or anything like that, feel free to put them in the chat. Let me know what you're thinking about, questions you have about basically anything in that realm, remote work as well. Happy to chat on the live stream here. So I'm going to switch over to my screen and we're just going to start digging around in Craft. We'll have fun today. So Craft, you can see here, they're really positioning themselves marketing-wise as a fresh take on collaboration and documents. I really think they're looking to be a more local alternative to something like Notion. Notion historically does not have very good offline support or any offline support on Mac or iOS or any platform that you're really using it on. I know they have that on their roadmap, and I don't know where they've gone with that so far, but having some kind of a workspace like this where you can add blocks and different types of content and move things around that has offline support, I know is an absolute must for some users. So it seems like they've really positioned themselves well. One thing I do know about this compared to something like Obsidian is that it uses a database in the back end to handle all the content management and things like that. So if you're just looking at getting into Craft to start off with and you're concerned about having to convert formats from some proprietary database format to something you can use like a plain text file or something like that, you will have to go through an export or conversion process. Some of the links and stuff are, from what I understand, I watched a video that Curtis McHale put out about exporting a bunch of stuff from Craft so that you would essentially get what you would use in Obsidian. It's not perfect, but it gets most of the job done from what I understand. Since we're just first figuring this out, let's take a look at pricing because I know it's not 100% free to use. So if you look here, we have free. It's very similar to how Notion was previously. Now Notion is free for personal use in general. It used to be that you only got 1,000 blocks for free and then you'd have to start paying. So that's similar to how Craft is positioning themselves. Plus then the upgrade is $44.99 a year. What is interesting is that they're looking at launching a team feature soon. So if you're interested, if everybody's based on Macs and you're looking at a software like Notion, Craft will have an option for teamwork as well. One thing to note too, if you're looking at using this data across applications, similar to what I was talking about earlier with exporting, you only get a PDF export on the free plan. So if you want more like a plain text export, you have to go up to the professional plan. So Brad is asking, I know it isn't about Craft, but I'm in the process of changing all of my wiki-linked pages that aren't pages, but used as tags in my system to aliases. Pros, cons, and thanks for the love for the live streams. I really appreciate that. I'll address that really quick here before we dive into Craft. Let's see, aliases. That's a really good question. I haven't really dug too deeply into the use cases of aliases in Obsidian. I know one awesome use case for that is to, like if you have a really long or complicated note title, but you want to associate just a couple keywords with it so it's easier to link, you can use an alias for that. Is there a particular reason that you're looking at moving over to aliases for those pages, Brad? I would love to hear a little bit more about what your thoughts are on that. But while we're waiting for your response, I'm just going to start poking around in here. We've already taken a look at the website. Looks like reasonable pricing. It is subscription, though, if you need it. And there are some limitations on the different tiers for craft. I'm going to close that out. And then I'll just minimize that because I forgot I still have a bunch of other browser tabs open. I don't want to get rid of all of them quite yet. So this is the main interface. I didn't do too much in here. I literally logged into Craft. I just downloaded it from the App Store and then created an account, which is pretty easy. And I literally haven't done anything else except for change the theme so that it was a little easier to see. So usually when I take a look at a piece of software like this first, I usually do this. So then I just like jump into preferences and so just try to figure out what the heck, kind of things I can do with it. The only thing I've changed so far in here is that I've changed it from system setting because I default to dark mode in macOS. But just for visibility on this live stream, I changed it to light. So you can increase the text size, you can change the accent color, you can reduce animations, which is nice. And then there's just some very basic information here. So not too much you can tweak around with in the settings on this one. Okay, so Brad, you're saying in Obsidian regarding to aliases that you don't like all the clutter with the pages that aren't pages. Well, that's totally okay. I mean, honestly, if you've experimented with it a little bit and you feel like aliases are going to work out in that regard, so it reduces the number of non-page pages that are linked in your vault, I don't see any problem with that. Most importantly, is something working for you. And if you find that it's working for you, then awesome. So say if like you have one note that you want to put a number of aliases on it. So say you have a note that's like TIL, which is today I learned. And then you have another random note, say productivity. I'm just pulling it out of my head. And so then if you want to collapse those all down into one note, you could create one kind of base note that uses aliases to link back to that one single note, so you have only one node that they go to. So I could see that being helpful. I haven't played around with that workflow too much, but definitely let me know. Let us know here too if that's something that you find is helpful. I would love to hear if there's something fun that you found out with that. So looking at craft here, again, I haven't really dug into this at all. I have no idea what I'm doing here. So I'm going to get into the getting started note. So it looks like there's lots of help documents here right in the app, which is great. You can use Markdown, code blocks, images, videos, PDF files, rich link previews. That's pretty great. One of the advantages that Craft has over Obsidian at this moment in time is that it does have mobile apps. So if you're somebody who's iPad only for a computer, or if you tend to like to do a lot of work on your iPad or iPhone, or you're out and about and you want to access your notes, that is a limitation with Obsidian at this point in time. So Craft might be an option. Do be aware, though, that the Obsidian developers are actively working on their Obsidian mobile applications. I know there may be some limitations, at least early on, with where you can store your vaults to use those mobile apps. The best experience is probably going to be through the Obsidian Sync service. So something just to be aware of going forward with that. There are some challenges with file providers on iOS, particularly Dropbox and Google Drive. They haven't fully implemented the APIs that Apple has created for interacting with their file systems in the Files app, which then causes challenges with interacting with those files in other applications. So Obsidian would interact with Dropbox files through the Files app by default, but with the way that Dropbox has handled that interaction, more than likely you're not going to be out of the box able to open up your whole vault. You would be more than likely with iCloud able to do that. So just things to consider if you're looking at hanging on for the Obsidian mobile apps. And you're not interested actually in purchasing Obsidian Sync. there might be some limitations around that going forward. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so I know there's like a sub page with card style and things like that in here, cards. I'm just going to take a look at a couple of these. So this is just similar markdown syntax. That's actually really interesting that you can just add a to-do with an X at the beginning of a line. Not a bad idea for that. Images and videos. Okay, so you just / to get the block menu. Pretty common way to get access to items if you're a Notion or Roam user, if you're familiar with that. Documents, pages, and blocks, creating pages, linking content. Okay, you do get backlinks, which is cool. I was aware of that, but that is always good to know. And then you can share as well inside of here. All right, well, I'm going to pop over to Welcome to Craft. Okay, right, structure, content the way you want. This is really nice. I know one of the biggest challenges of something like Roam is if you have a large graph and the way they sync content back and forth and store it is that it can take a long time. It's been a number of months now since I've used Roam. So I'm sure the speed has improved, but I know previously it took a long time to sync on first open of the application. So it's nice to know that the way this is structured is that it's likely putting everything into a database locally when you're creating stuff and pulling from that database, and then it's syncing it in the background, which is definitely a faster way to go. So I do like how nice Craft looks. I mean, I'm an aesthetics person. I'm a person who avoided using DevonThink 2 because I did not like the way it looked. I'm also a person who, I can't remember the name of the mail client that is just super powerful for the Mac, but it's totally escaping me. But it looks like a really old school Mac app, and it hasn't been updated in a long time. And I've really resisted using applications like that because they don't look good. Craft looks amazing. I like the white space. I like the margin in it. I like the colors and font choices that the app developer has put into this because it just looks good. It looks like an Apple application, really. If Apple really took, I guess I would say it seems like if Apple took Notes really, really seriously and wanted to build a collaboration tool, honestly, I feel like Craft would be very similar to what that would end up looking like because it has that aesthetic to it, which is pretty nice. Okay, so I just opened up the sidebar here because I was curious about it. And you can actually drag and drop stuff from over here, which is wild. I think that's pretty neat. Very user-friendly. Like, it's really fast to just type backticks code block. See if that even works. Nope, that doesn't work because I have to create a code block, don't I? Yeah, so I can use the / command and get all these here. Code block. Okay. Yeah, and then that comes in that way. Challenge though is, okay, I can do, you can do syntax highlighting in Pro. Okay, that's interesting. Interesting though, for a code block, it doesn't seem very easy to copy the contents of it. Well, you can copy the whole block. Because to me, a use of a code block is if you're looking to store snippets of code that are usable. To me, it would be like hovering your mouse over this and have an ability to copy the entire code block or easily like highlight and select that without having to go into actually editing the code block. So that's kind of a goofy thing in my mind. JSM XWLL. Comfortable aesthetics reduce friction for me and makes me more likely to use the tool. Me too. I definitely like aesthetics when it comes to using tools. I know Obsidian is not like the most necessarily visually pleasing application, but it has an aesthetic to it in my brain. So something doesn't have to be beautiful or perfect for me to like. It doesn't have to have all this extra level of polish on it for me to want to use it. It just has to work in a way that makes sense. So it's aesthetic for me. Like there's one layer of it, which is the look, the design of an application. And then there's another layer of user experience. When you have both, like if you have a lesser design level on an application, but a high quality of user experience, I am more likely to use that application than if it was the other way around. If you have a high design level and it looks great, but the user experience isn't very good, then I'm not going to use that at all. And then if both are low, no, I'm not even interested whatsoever in that, just because that's the way my brain's wired. I know some people, they don't really care at all, but that's it. Okay, so this is interesting. Come to the end of a block and I could just add content. Okay, so this is a sub page. So basically a block there can function as like a zoom in almost. I'm just going to see and what that looks like. I'm going to do that right here. Okay. That's kind of nice. And then I know I can do that again here. Okay, so you don't get, you don't get the next level underneath from the top page, but that's okay. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm totally not the most LaTeX knowledgeable person, but I've never really had to use it. Okay, so I'm just kind of toying around with these just to see how it works. Okay, so you get a preview of that page. I'm just going to see what happens if I do that. Okay, so it just truncates it at the end of the line, and then you can go deeper into it. That's kind of nifty because then you can nest all this information together. Obsidian offers a great typing experience, and you can improve the aesthetic a lot with good CSS. Yes, you can. That, I know, is one of the upsides of a software like Obsidian is you can customize the heck out of it, and I appreciate that. I am not usually one who digs too deep into customizing like that. I don't tinker with stuff like that. I like to try to keep things simple for my systems that I have. But there are occasions where some tinkering is helpful for me. So it's really good to be able to do that. I do like how this kind of nests notes under things. You have subpages under blocks. That is, I think, something that is a bit of an advantage over Notion, where you can have subpages and subpages, but just the way this works, you can turn any block into a subpage. So you can add more information to literally anything. So if you have like a point here that you want to dig into a little bit more, but you don't want to have it in your top level document, you can always do that. I think that's pretty nifty. It's very handy if you're looking at creating a document or some kind of a knowledge store where you want to give people a top level view of what's there, and then you could dive deeper into it. I think that's really a handy thing. Buddha Dude, would I use this over Obsidian? I don't think so. Not at this point in time. Reason being is... one, I'm pretty invested in Obsidian at this point in time. I'm not even talking from a Like I have this YouTube channel. Lots of my videos are on Obsidian. I have this course, Obsidian Made Simple. I not really talking in that frame of mind, but more in the, I have a workflow that works for me. And I've really enjoyed engaging with knowledge and notes that I have inside of Obsidian. And to move all of that into a software like Craft is probably not the thing that I would do. There's a lot of potential in Craft for Zettelkasten type note taking. I know other people use it specifically for that. But for me, yeah, I don't think I would replace Obsidian in my workflow with this. If anything, I would probably replace Notion, just depending on the kinds of blocks and information that I can get going in this. Yeah, because I'm just looking here. A lot of it is just, it's more like structured information though. So what I use Notion for right now is more of a database of sorts for video and content production for the YouTube channel for Effective Remote Work for my podcast process, which if you haven't checked that out, that's at podcast.effectiveremotework.com. If you're into productivity, I definitely recommend giving it a listen. But I use Notion for a lot of that. I could see Craft eventually maybe taking over some of that, but I use a lot of the calendar and database tools that Notion offers. But as far as a replacement for Obsidian, unless I got really frustrated with something in Obsidian, I don't think I would transfer over at this point in time. The other thing to think about too is that this is a database. This is information stored inside of a database. Yes, you can export it to text files and PDFs and the like, but I really like the fluidity of having text files on my operating system. Say, for example, like something happened to me. I was no longer able to use my computer or wasn't around anymore or anything like that. I have all of these thoughts and ideas and points that I would love to share with someone else, but be it my wife or my kids or something. And to have them have to come into an application like Craft and figure out how to export them and save them, Craft could disappear at any time. Therefore, it might be a challenge to try to get that information out in a meaningful way where it includes attachments and it includes all the other stuff I've added in here in a way that makes sense. It's more challenging. But if I keep all of that stuff in a text file format, I mean, that's a format that's been around for decades as it has been. And Obsidian really just functioned as a layer on top of that to interact with text files. And so having those files around for a long time already, and then being able to have those files likely around for many, many years to come, that's kind of what I'm thinking is beneficial with sticking for Obsidian for me. Buddha Dude says, I dislike that Obsidian doesn't feel much like a Mac app. Yes, it does not. It's an Electron application. It's a web app in a wrapper. But I definitely agree that it doesn't feel like a Mac app. But for me, I guess I've gotten over I need to have a Mac app, local native application feel on things. Where I run into issues with that, if something isn't native, is if it's inherently slower. Like the Notion app. I kept having issues with the Notion app on Mac for a long, long time. It felt slow. It felt clunky. That wasn't the best experience in the world. But having used Obsidian for the better part of a year now, it's lightning fast. Lightning fast. I don't even notice that it's not a native Mac app. It doesn't have the native Mac app look, but performance-wise, I haven't noticed any issues. So that's where it doesn't really cause me problems. JSM, there's such a huge inertial cost to changing tools in a lot of cases. I hate that part. Even if the tool's better, the cost of changing can take a long time to recover. Reminds me of all the publications that were finished after Nicholas Luhmann's death because of his Zettelkasten. Yeah. So around the inertial cost, yes. I've been a person who has switched tools quite a bit, but it's because I hadn't really found workflows that connected with the way that I think and the way that I do things. And now that I've started to get those workflows going, particularly with note taking, and I have a thought process and I have a way to organize things, and I have this flow for how I like to do the work in the tool, to switch to something else that functions completely differently is a massive, massive shift. It's just, yeah, it's not something I'm interested in doing at this point in time. And it's easy to switch tools when you're not set in stone with them. That's why I like to do lots of experiments with tools where I don't fully commit into something, but I'm actively trying it out. But yeah, that's kind of the gist there. And yeah, I'm not necessarily interested in like having a lot of publications posthumously, but it's more like I will have a set of things that I can share with the people who will come after me, and maybe they can learn from my experiences or not. That's kind of been my long-term mindset for taking notes. Brad asks, do I do my actual writing in Obsidian, or do I use it just for note-taking and for thinking? That's a great question. I think the bigger question is, do I do actual writing? Actually, no, I don't do a lot of full-on writing of content. I don't do scripts for my videos. I don't do scripts for podcasts. That's not really the way my brain works. I feel like I can get a more authentic delivery and a more, it's even faster for me to do some kind of an outline. And a lot of times I'll stumble into something that doesn't necessarily fit in the script while I'm doing the delivery. And it just makes sense for me to keep going with it versus, oh no, like I got to get back on script so I know where I'm at. So I don't do a lot of beginning to end writing and revising. I do know that if I were to think about writing a book or something in the future, I'd probably use a tool like Ulysses just because it's designed for long form writing like that. But I would use Obsidian to start to pull together a lot of the ideas. So instead of having, creating a broad outline and stuff, I'd probably start by pulling together different pods of content or maps of content in Obsidian that I'm interested in covering in a written work, and then building off it from there. So that's kind of the gist for me of the content production process side. JSM says, I love that I can grep Xarg said and mass change my notes to fix structural changes or tags. Yes, being able to do command line tools is awesome for text files. You don't get that option in other tools. You are at the whim of what the developer includes. So if they don't have a find and replace, too bad. I mean, Obsidian doesn't have a broad find and replace ability. And if you're not familiar with command line tools or you don't want to use those, you could open up a whole vault in a tool like VS Code and be able to do a in project find and replace using a graphical user interface. So that's just one of the amazing things about having text files, that you can use those files in many different applications. I mean, you could open up your vault inside of Vim if you wanted to. I don't know if there's any plugins inside of Vim that allow you to browse wiki links like that. I know there's Vim Wiki, but I haven't dug too deep into configuring that. And I am a Vim user when I do coding and stuff. I think it's vastly easier to write using Vim. But anyway, that's kind of a rabbit hole to get down to today. Okay, so back to the home page. Craft, you can use it for creatives, writing, teams, home. That's interesting. I mean, there might be some uses that I could find for craft in other areas versus just a Zettelkasten. So Buddha Dude asks, how do you use database apps like this? Can you clarify your question a little bit more? What you're specifically looking to get out of that? JSM, okay, so VimWiki does work for that. I might have to take a look at that because I know Vim mode in Obsidian is nice, but I'm so familiar with navigating around in Vim itself that being able to edit my vault inside of Vim would be a good thing. I like that. It's just I spent some time getting serious about learning how to use Vim for coding. It's probably 2 or 3 years ago now, and man, I can't use anything else for it. It's just stuck in my brain. It's so efficient, and I know how to use it, and I only probably use 20% of the capacity and power of Vim, but that's really it. Okay, I'm just gonna take a look. Okay, it's gonna open up the browser. No thanks. Not now. I don't want to do that now. I'm gonna create a new document. Yeah, Vim is a sunk cost fallacy that actually pays off. It kind of is. I mean, okay, so if you're not familiar with Vim, it's a command line editor that, note taking. That's not a note taker, it's an editor. It's like a text file editor. Primarily, a lot of people use it for coding. You can use it for writing. And it's found on just about any Linux or Mac computer that you can get your hands on. And it's designed for being able to edit at the speed of thought is kind of the mentality behind it. And so you use some letter keys for it, and just the way you can tie commands together is so effective, and you don't even have to touch the mouse, which is great. Okay, so Boodadoo says for his question, how to use database apps like this. As in, I use Bear for quick note taking, then use Obsidian for long-term notes. Where does database apps like this or Notion fall into your flow? Great question. Okay, so I used to use Bear all the time. Bear was my note-taking software of choice. My thoughts on, that's a fantastic software. I know they have drastically slowed down development on it in the last couple of years just because they want to get their new editor out the door, which they just launched, kind of an alpha or a beta for it. That's not part of Bear, but it's separate from it. I know that's a massive restructure for them to try to undertake that, so I definitely understand that they're probably trying to spend a lot of time getting that right. So Bear is a cool app. I used to use it all the time, but because it was a database application and I wanted to get my notes out of tools like that, that I want to keep around long term, then I got out of that. This all kind of started last year about this time. I was getting frustrated with database style applications like that. I was playing around with Apple Notes, and I was just like, this isn't working for me. When you get a lot of notes into a tool like that, you got to figure out a way to organize them well. I'm not usually one who just relies on search for notes. I like to browse through things. And then I learned about Roam Research and got dug into that. So I'm going off on a tangent right now, but I'll come back to it. So that's kind of what got me into Obsidian, because I did this big deep dive into Roam Research alternatives because I didn't really like some of the approaches that Roam Research was taking as far as structuring their product and things like that. So all of that to say, database applications. Probably the two database applications that I use right now are Notion and Drafts. Notion I use for tracking and handling content production for the YouTube channel, for the podcast. It's where I store my ideas, where I can outline stuff if I want to. Sometimes I'll use Obsidian for that, though. I'll create a content calendar there so that I have a frame of like what is coming up when, and then what status in the production process it's in. Has it been recorded yet? Does it need editing? Is it ready to go? Do I need to do post-production stuff on it where I'm making thumbnails or writing descriptions and the like? So that one's in my workflow. And then Drafts is kind of my quick capture bucket on mobile. I don't really use it too much on Mac OS, and I'm only using the free version. I used to be a paid subscriber, but I haven't used many of the power tool features of that. Not to mention the fact that Drafts has been kind of pivoting to being more of a full-fledged note-taking tool versus like kind of a capture point for text, which I think is the main strength of drafts, but it's gotten quite overcomplicated for me over time. Definitely a power tool for iOS if you're looking at using something like that. But drafts for me has always been, I need a quick place to write down something. I don't want to open up another application. Drafts is in my dock. Let's write it down, and then I can come back to it at a later point in time. It can be text, it can be notes, it can be tasks, it can be just a thought that I had. It can be anything really that I want to put somewhere else later. So for me, the mindset towards database applications at this point in time in my workflow is ephemeral. If something is going to be around long term, like I want to keep something for the long term, I want to be able to access it over and over and over again, it is not going inside of a database like that, where the file structure is obfuscated from me. I will use database apps like that when it makes sense. But I will primarily use a database application when the information there is something I'm only concerned about for a short period of time. The difference with that, though, is with DevonThink. DevonThink is something I'm looking at using for a long-term reference library, and they use databases locally. You can also index file systems on your local computer inside of DevonThink. But I'm planning on using databases for a lot of it. But the thing that's different with DevonThink is that it's just storing files, plain text files, PDFs and stuff inside of a database. So I can still get that information out of it very easily. That's kind of the gist of how I'm thinking about database type stuff. Let's see. JSM, wiki link by Henry, don't want to butcher the last name, is the name of the Vim plugin he uses for navigating wiki links. I'll have to check that out. Alex says, I used to use Bear as well and also switched because I couldn't browse my notes and have an overview of my knowledge base. In Bear, I could only see around 5 notes at a time and searching was painful. Yes, that is exactly the issue that I was having. I had an awesome tag structure set up in Bear where I could find different sections of notes, and especially with the parent-child relationship and tags in Bear, that was really a beneficial thing for me. But this, like, everything is in one long list that can only be sorted aspect of the UI got to be overwhelming, especially when I got to have more than a couple hundred notes in there, which I did at one point. So it just became a little more difficult to find information and structure it in a way that made sense. If Bear had some kind of a way to, I know they have wiki links, which I never really explored at that time because I didn't really get how I might be able to use them in a note-taking workflow. But I think if Bear had some kind of way where you could, I don't know, visualize your notes a little bit differently or browse through your notes a little bit differently, that it might be a little easier to handle long term. But yes, I totally agree, Alex, that the graph view in Obsidian and the fuzzy searching was just, it was night and day difference between what I was using previously. So back into craft here. I don't know how too far I'm going to get into this, but there's different stylings. You can make a page as a card, or you can make a page card. That's interesting. So you can style it as a card. And then you can change the font for the pages. Very similar to how Notion does it. Got keyboard shortcuts. You can share. Export to Markdown text bundle. Text bundle is nice to see that because that's an interoperable file format between lots of different apps. Particularly like if you're using something like Ulysses, you can import text bundle in there, and that includes images and the like. You can send to these different applications. Yeah. I mean, Craft. Okay. Craft seems like a pretty interesting application, and it's got a lot of stuff to it. Again, I'm really only just scratching the very surface of what you can do inside of Craft today. I just kind of wanted to get a broad overview of what might be capable in it, and I think there's a lot of power here. I might do a little bit more looking into some of these at a different point in time, and I might do a more formal first look at craft video for the channel at some point in the future. I could see this being something helpful to maybe share information, like household type information with my wife, or where I'm storing different kinds of information for effective remote work. If I need a more structured knowledge base for something like that. But without having the database style features with fields and setting dates and doing calendars like I can in Notion at this point in time, I don't necessarily see moving too far away from that in the future. And then again, I don't see moving away from Obsidian to use Craft at this moment, just because I really love having everything in plain text. That's just a big benefit to me, to where I know other people that is a downside, and not having mobile apps at the moment is a downside. So it's really honestly up to you what you think about, Craft. There's a lot to this, and I hear that the mobile apps are really good, and there's lots of things that you can do. I'll have to take a look at those as well to see what I think about them. I would imagine they're awesome, but I mean, if you're building something natively, it's going to be pretty decent if you're a decent developer. But when you're dealing with wrapping something like an Electron application, and you've got a big honking beast like Notion, I mean, there were a lot of compromises that were made there for their mobile application that they're still trying to catch up on, just because they needed to get one out the door. So yeah, that's that. Any other questions that anybody has today before we kind of close down the live stream? I'd love to chat about anything in my workflow or about effective remote work productivity. It's been pretty fun. I'm planning on getting more into a cadence of doing these live streams again. I was doing them more on a weekly basis a couple of months ago, but just due to changes in my life and wanting to make sure that I have a sustainable rhythm for putting content out there, I'm doing a pre-recorded video on the YouTube channel once every other week, and then I'll do a live stream on the other weeks, because these are a lot easier to navigate and engage. They don't require hours of prep or editing and trying to get things sorted out. I can usually just pick a topic, kind of come sit down and chat through it with you guys, or just start working on my Obsidian vault, because everybody has awesome questions when you're hanging out in the live stream with me. So I really appreciate that. If you haven't checked it out yet, I do have a podcast called Process. We just crossed the 2-year threshold for that, which is pretty fun. And that's at podcast.effectiveremotework.com. 3 a.m. live streams is pretty fun, JSM. That's pretty cool. I'm glad that you were able to join today. I know it's only 1:14 in the afternoon here. So where are you located at? That'd be interesting. Thanks for joining from where you're at. But I'll put a link in the show, or not in the show notes, but in the, you can see what I do all the time. I'll put a link in the chat to the podcast. So the podcast is largely targeted towards like broader, bigger picture productivity mindsets and ideas. I do talk about some tooling and stuff there, but a lot of it, because it's harder to talk about tools in an audio only format, we do tend to focus primarily on how can you live a life that is productive, but that's also balanced in pursuit of more of the process of life and the process of building a productivity system, the process of chasing your goals, versus just trying to give you solutions to that. The way that I see a lot of what I do here at Effective Remote Work is not really trying to sell you a solution to a problem, but more trying to come alongside of you and say, hey, how can I help you and be a support to you in the journey that you're on for productivity and work and all the like. Okay, so, you're in Taiwan. Okay, that's fun. Well, thanks for joining. I appreciate that. I haven't had the pleasure of going to Taiwan, but I think that would be very interesting to travel there someday. Have I run into any issues with having too many notes in Obsidian? No, I haven't. I know they've done some stress tests with it for like 10,000 notes, but and they didn't really have too many issues with that. You have a bit over 40,000. Wow, that's quite a lot of notes. And Obsidian doesn't like it too much. I would definitely recommend raising that with the developers on the forum if you haven't already, forum.obsidian.md, and just kind of give them some pointers and stuff and just kind of some tips on what's kind of happening because there might be some optimizations they can make in the application to handle those large workloads and those large file sets a little bit better. I know there's always ways to make performance optimizations in applications, but it just depends on how they want to do it. So that's probably the best thing. I would imagine that it probably chokes a little bit if it's trying to query too many things at once. So I would definitely recommend just raising that one with the developers. Well, I think that's going to wrap up today's live stream. I know I got another message coming in here that I can't see quite yet on my YouTube chat because it's a little bit behind. So I apologize for that. So JSM, Taiwan is my favorite country outside the US. Can't recommend it enough. That's awesome. I've traveled to Asia a couple different times. I've spent some time in Thailand, and I've also spent some time in South Korea. And both of those were amazing experiences. I love the people in both of those countries. It was just fantastic being able to immerse myself in different cultures. South Korea being a little bit more like the United States in some regards than Thailand, but both were an amazing experience to learn about how different people think and different people do things in different parts of the world. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up today's live stream. I really appreciate everybody for joining today. Again, I'm going to try to do these on a bi-weekly basis. So the next one I'm planning to do is in 2 weeks, not on Thursday, on Friday. I don't have availability to do it tomorrow, so that's why I did it a day early today. But be expecting to see these just about every other Friday in the next coming months, because I've really enjoyed doing these and having these conversations with you. Again, if you're not familiar with me or you're not connected with Effective Remote Work at all, you can hit the subscribe button on the channel here. You can check out our main website at effectiveremotework.com. We've got a podcast@effectiveremotework.com. And that's really about it. Again, I thank you so much for joining the live stream today. Take care. We'll talk